Have you ever been on a flight and felt like someone didn't want you there? Just because you didn't look like them? What if a woman thought a few clever words could get a man kicked out of first class, only to find out he was an FBI agent? How do you think she would react when she realizes she made a mistake she can't undo? Stick around till the end of the story, and let me know, what would you do if you were in that situation? Olivia Williams walked through the boarding gate with a confident stride, each step reflecting the power she had built throughout her life. She didn't need to look at the signs. She had flown this route countless times before. First class wasn't a privilege for her, it was the standard. From the custom-designed suitcase gliding across the floor to her assessing gaze as it swept over the cabin, everything was clear. Olivia was the kind of person who never accepted surprises. But sometimes the world doesn't care about what you expect. As she neared her seat, an odd feeling crept into her chest. Something was wrong. A man was sitting next to her, but not just any man. A black man in a well-tailored suit, the light from his laptop screen reflecting off his determined face. A sense of discomfort rose within Olivia, almost instinctively. She had never had to share this space with someone who wasn't from her world. She placed her bag down with more force than usual. The man didn't respond. Frustration flashed through her. He wasn't looking at her. He didn't acknowledge her presence. He didn't explain why he was there. This wasn't right. Olivia tightened her grip on her bag, her gaze growing colder. She wouldn't let this continue. The sky outside stretched endlessly, but Olivia Williams' world was compact, orderly, and within her control. The flight from Washington, D.C. to Dallas wasn't anything to worry about. It was just part of the routine. Like the wine poured at the perfect temperature, like the familiar greeting from the flight attendants. Everything in first class had to be perfect. No surprises, no disruptions. But as soon as she walked in, a restlessness settled in. Someone had taken her space. Not her seat, but the quiet, the privacy, the comfort she had always assumed was hers. A man, a navy suit, calm, confident, like he belonged here. Olivia paused for a moment. A strange sensation crawled up her spine. No, this was first class. This place wasn't for uncertainty. She shifted her bag to the side, her eyes narrowing slightly. If there was a mistake here, it needed to be corrected immediately. She took a breath, offering a professional smile, a smile that never accepted rejection. "Excuse me," she said softly, but behind the politeness, there was an undercurrent of tension. Olivia Williams was not the type of person who was easily surprised. She had flown this route hundreds of times. Every detail in first class was as familiar as her own breath, until she saw him. Benjamin King sat there, calm, quiet, completely unaffected by her presence. A black man in first class. This wasn't impossible, but something about it didn't feel right. He didn't seem flustered, not worried, not like he was taking up space that wasn't his. Olivia tightened her grip on her bag, tilting her head slightly. No hesitation, no expectation of acknowledgement from her, something she had come to expect from everyone around her. She waited a moment, but Benjamin didn't look up. His fingers glided over the keyboard as though she didn't exist, and that made Olivia even more frustrated. Everything in her life was in order, in control, and this wasn't in the plan. If he didn't recognize his mistake, she would help him understand. Olivia leaned forward, her lips curling into a polite smile, but inside frustration was boiling. "Excuse me." Her voice was soft as a feather, but there was an invisible weight behind it. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Benjamin King slowly looked up. His eyes were sharp but calm, as though he had been in this situation before. "Yes, I'm sure," he replied briefly, then returned his attention to his laptop screen, as if the conversation was over. But Olivia wasn't about to let it end like that. She cleared her throat, her gaze sweeping over the first-class cabin, searching for a flight attendant, someone who could fix this mistake. No one came. She tried again, this time with a bit more determination. "It's just, I fly this route quite often, and usually there's no confusion about seating." Benjamin slowly closed his laptop, his gaze no longer just calm but a silent warning. Olivia could feel the change in the air, but she didn't back down. She hadn't lost yet. Not like this. She subtly raised her hand, signaling for a flight attendant. Emily Jacobs walked over, her professional smile unchanged. Is everything okay, Mrs. Williams? Olivia tilted her head, feigning embarrassment. I think, there might be a small mix-up. She glanced quickly toward Benjamin, as though trying to keep her tone neutral, but making the implication clear. Emily didn't blink. She pulled out her tablet and quickly scanned the passenger list. It only took a few seconds. Mr. King is in the correct seat, she announced in a calm voice. An awkward silence filled the air. Olivia blinked, tightening her grip on her handbag. She hadn't expected the answer to come so quickly, so confidently. Are you sure? Emily smiled, polite but firm. Absolutely sure, ma'am. In that moment, Olivia felt like she had lost something. Part of her control, part of her power. Benjamin didn't say a word, merely lifting his coffee cup as though nothing had happened. But Olivia knew something had just changed. She gripped the armrest of her seat but kept her outward composure. She wasn't used to being denied, especially in a space like this, where everything was supposed to revolve around her comfort. She adjusted her posture, lowering her voice just enough for Emily to hear. Actually, I don't feel comfortable sitting here. Emily tilted her head, her professional gaze not hiding a hint of scrutiny. Not comfortable? With what, ma'am? Olivia hesitated for a moment. She couldn't say the real reason. It's just, I'd prefer another seat. Perhaps there's a seat in first class I could switch to? Benjamin remained silent, but she could feel his gaze on her, sharp, waiting. Emily quickly glanced at her tablet and looked up. I'm sorry, but we're fully booked in first class. Olivia's heart sank. No way. Well, what about economy? She said quickly, a spark of hope flashing. Emily blinked, then smiled. We have 2 available seats in economy. Olivia tilted her head slightly. Perfect. She turned to Benjamin, ready to see him leave. But then, Emily spoke again. Would you like me to downgrade your seat, ma'am? In that moment, Olivia's entire world seemed to freeze. No way. Olivia tightened her grip on her handbag, trying not to let her emotions show. She wasn't used to being denied, especially not in first class, where every one of her requests was always met. Emily still held her polite smile, but her eyes were no longer just professional. I've checked, ma'am. All the first-class seats are taken. The simple answer, but the weight of it hit Olivia like a bucket of cold water. First class? Full? She glanced quickly around the cabin, as if she could spot the mistake with her own eyes. But every seat was taken. There was no escape for her. A wave of murmurs spread through a few rows ahead. Olivia could feel the eyes on her, waiting for her reaction. Benjamin remained seated, expressionless. No mockery, no provocation. He simply existed there, as though first class was where he belonged. Olivia took a deep breath. She didn't like this feeling. So, her voice was light but sharp. I have no other choice? Emily tilted her head. Exactly. A long silence stretched. For the first time, Olivia felt like she was losing control. The silence stretched throughout the first-class cabin. Olivia could feel every glance directed her way, every moment of anticipation from the surrounding passengers. But she kept her back straight, maintaining perfect control over her voice. If there's a seat available in economy, she paused as though considering a reasonable suggestion. Then her eyes slowly turned toward Benjamin. Perhaps he could sit there. Another wave of silence swept through the cabin, but this time it felt heavier. Benjamin still didn't speak. No surprise, no confusion. He just looked at Olivia, his gaze calm, as though he had been through this situation countless times before. Emily tilted her head slightly, her professional demeanor unwavering. But this time, her tone dropped lower. Are you suggesting that I ask Mr. King, an eligible first-class passenger, to give up his seat and move to economy just because you don't feel comfortable? In that moment, Olivia realized her mistake. She could hear someone subtly inhale. A woman in the row ahead nudged her husband. Across the aisle, someone pretended to adjust their headphones, but was clearly listening intently to every word. But no one was more shocked than Olivia. She hadn't expected to be met with this kind of resistance. She had thought it was a simple request, but clearly, It was anything but simple. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin grew heavier than ever. Emily stood up straighter, her polite smile now gone. She glanced briefly at Benjamin, then turned back to Olivia, her gaze sharp yet composed. "Mrs. Williams, I'm afraid I can't fulfill this request." Emily's voice was light but firm, with no room for compromise. Olivia blinked. "Can't?" Emily tilted her head. "I can't ask a first-class passenger, someone who's paid for their seat, to move to economy just because you don't feel comfortable." Those words were like a knife cutting into the control Olivia was desperately trying to hold on to. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she realized that some passengers were listening intently. A man in the row ahead whistled quietly. A young woman slowly raised her phone, pretending to text but clearly recording the conversation. Benjamin remained seated, silent, unopposed. But also, he didn't leave. Olivia gritted her teeth. "I'm not saying," Emily interrupted. "But you implied it, ma'am." Olivia's chest tightened. She was used to power, to giving orders and being obeyed. But now in front of everyone, she was the one being criticized. She hadn't thought it would go this far, but it seemed like everything was now beyond her control. Olivia could feel it clearly, eyes slipping through each row of seats, breaths being held back, phones quietly raised. A man in the row ahead pretended to check his messages, but his phone screen was recording. A couple across the aisle whispered to each other, their eyes glancing at Olivia, no longer hiding their curiosity. And worst of all, she couldn't do anything to stop it. Benjamin King remained silent. No words, no arguments. He did nothing, and that made Olivia feel like she was the one losing control. She gripped her handbag strap so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to escape this situation, to have something, anything turn in her favor. But as her gaze swept across the cabin, all she saw were judgment, disbelief, and worst of all, acknowledgement. This was no longer a private moment. She was being watched, and Olivia understood. This wasn't over. Olivia felt like she was losing control. No, she had lost control. She looked around the first-class cabin, seeing the judging eyes, the whispers, the phones still silently recording. She could feel the situation turning against her, a feeling so foreign and terrifying. But Olivia was not the type of person who gave up. She took a breath, lowered her voice to its lowest, but just enough for Emily to hear. "I don't feel safe." The silence that fell on the plane was sudden and complete. Emily blinked. "Excuse me, ma'am." Olivia slowly turned her head toward Benjamin, not needing to elaborate, but the implication was clear. "I don't want to cause trouble, but I think the crew should consider this situation." Her voice was sweet, but with an invisible weight, a signal she believed would lead to the desired outcome. A woman in the row ahead gasped softly. A man with Bluetooth headphones shook his head in disgust. Benjamin remained unresponsive, unmoved. Emily, however, no longer held her professional smile. She stood straight, her voice colder than ever. "Can you clarify what you mean?" And in that moment, Olivia knew she had gone too far. No one said anything. No one moved. But Olivia felt the change, the feeling that every eye was now on her. The man with the Bluetooth headphones slowly took them off, as though he wanted to make sure he had heard her correctly. A middle-aged woman in the row ahead tilted her head, her gaze slowly scanning from Olivia to Benjamin, then back again, her astonishment clear on her face. Emily remained standing, her eyes fixed on Olivia. "You're saying you don't feel safe? Because of what exactly?" Her voice had dropped lower, but there was something sharp beneath it. Olivia realized she was being cornered, but she had gone too far to back down now. She took a breath, her voice dropping as though trying to appear cautious. "I feel like something is wrong." No one responded immediately, but then from across the cabin, a voice rang out, not loud but enough for everyone to hear. "Is this really happening again?" A chuckle, a frustrated sigh. Then someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Olivia could feel the panic tightening around her. The whispers grew louder. The gazes directed at her were no longer curious, but judgmental. But then, a small but weighty movement. Benjamin King slowly closed his laptop. Not hurried, not angry, just a deliberate action. He slipped his hand into his jacket pocket. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then he pulled out a small leather case, opening it with a familiar motion. The FBI badge gleamed under the cabin lights. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. Olivia's eyes widened, her body freezing. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Benjamin held the badge in his hand, his gaze unshaken. "Mrs. Williams," he said softly but with authority, "would you like to file a formal complaint? I can take it right here." The silence became suffocating. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person stifled a laugh. Olivia couldn't find her voice. She had lost. But worse than that, she had dug her own grave. In that moment, no one spoke. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. Then, a soft chuckle. A man in the row ahead shook his head, a half smile of amusement on his face. A young woman across the aisle covered her mouth, her eyes lighting up as she quickly adjusted her phone to capture the perfect angle. An older couple exchanged a glance, as if they had just witnessed an intense play they never expected to see. And Olivia, caught right at the center of it all. She stared at the FBI badge in Benjamin's hand, as if it were a fatal blow. This couldn't be happening. No way. But it had. And worse, everyone was watching. Benjamin stood motionless, his gaze calm but unyielding. "So, Mrs. Williams?" His voice was low, but in the first-class cabin, it rang out like a sentence. One passenger chuckled, another gave a soft clap. The phone buzzed. A video was being uploaded, and Olivia felt her entire world begin to collapse. She stared at the gleaming FBI badge in Benjamin's hand, as if it were a knife that had pierced through her pride. She had gone too far. What had started as mere discomfort, a situation she thought she could easily fix, had now spiraled beyond her control. She hadn't just failed to get Benjamin removed from first class, she had falsely accused a federal agent. All eyes were on her. An older woman shook her head, her gaze a mix of disappointment and disdain. A young man nearby whispered something to the person next to him, and they both burst into giggles. The phone was still held up, the perfect angle capturing every detail of the moment. Olivia swallowed hard, her palms sweating. She could feel her future cracking right before her eyes. Benjamin still didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The truth was already too clear. What could she do now? Take back her words, beg for forgiveness, make excuses. There was no escape. For the first time in her life, Olivia understood that she had pushed herself to the edge, and this time, no one would pull her back. The whispers snaked through the first-class cabin like a small wave that slowly spread. Olivia felt it before she heard it. The glances, the half-smiles full of implication, the whispers just loud enough for her to know they were aimed at her. In the row ahead, a man pretended to cough lightly, but couldn't hide his amusement. A middle-aged woman turned to her husband, her lips curling in a slight smirk. "Another one learning a lesson today." A young man with headphones picked up his phone, certainly not to check messages. The perfect angle, the screen reflecting a faint blue light, the video was being recorded. Olivia felt her heart race. She needed to regain control of the situation. She adjusted her posture, cleared her throat, trying to reclaim her usual calm demeanor. But then, a soft laugh echoed from the row across the aisle. A wave of fear spread, not because of this moment, but because of what was about to follow. She knew how these things ended. A video went viral. A name was exposed. A career was destroyed. She looked down at her empty palm. No power, no control, only a slow collapse that she couldn't stop. Olivia felt herself sinking deeper into a storm she couldn't control. She clenched her fist, feeling the tension pressing down in every finger. Every eye was on her, waiting for her to react, and she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. But how could she regain power in this situation? Olivia took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She knew she had to appear vulnerable to make others sympathize. She wasn't the villain, just a woman placed in an unbearable situation. "I just felt unsafe, not because I wanted to bother anyone," Olivia said, her voice gentle, but with a breaking that was hard to hide. She looked around, hoping to find a sympathetic glance, a sign of understanding. Benjamin didn't say anything, but his gaze was no longer filled with the anger she had anticipated. It was somewhat weary. He had been through many situations like this, not just hers. Olivia looked around, still holding on to a little hope. But could sympathy replace justice in this cabin? She wondered if she could take back her words, and if anyone would stand by her when everything was falling apart. Benjamin said nothing. No rebuttals, no excuses, no arguments. He didn't need to. While Olivia wrestled with her loss of control, Benjamin simply resumed his work. He put the FBI badge back in his jacket pocket, reopened his laptop, and his fingers glided over the keys with absolute composure, as though none of this had ever happened. But Olivia knew that wasn't true. Everyone was still watching her. Phones were still raised. An older man sipped his wine, a knowing smile on his face. Another flight attendant stood quietly nearby, observing but not intervening, because there was nothing left to intervene with. Everything was already so clear. Benjamin didn't need to defeat her with words. The truth had already spoken for itself. He didn't need to do anything to defend himself because he had never been the one at fault. But Olivia was different. She felt trapped, exposed under the gaze of dozens of people. Benjamin went on with his work, calm as though she had never existed. And that was the thing that made Olivia feel her failure the most. The plane touched down on the runway, but Olivia's nightmare was just beginning. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, trying to shake off the heavy feeling in her chest. But then a sound shattered her fragile hope. A phone ringing, then another, and another. Olivia blinked, looking down at her handbag. The phone screen flashed repeatedly, an array of messages, missed calls, social media notifications. She tapped it with a vague sense of dread, her finger trembling as she unlocked the screen. Her name was trending. Olivia swallowed hard and opened a link. And then she saw herself. A short video, no more than 10 seconds, but enough to destroy everything. A woman tries to kick an FBI agent out of first class. Watch until the end to see the moment she realizes her mistake. The views climb by the second. 125,000, 193,000, 315,000. Her body went cold. This story wasn't stopping on the plane. It was spreading, and nothing could stop it now. Olivia's phone buzzed nonstop. She tried to ignore it, but each buzz felt like a hammer strike, signaling that the real storm was coming. She opened the screen and froze. Voicemail, 23 missed calls. Messages, 58 unread notifications. Twitter, her name was trending. She scrolled quickly through the messages. Olivia, what's going on? Everyone's talking about you. Don't tell me that's you in that video. Oh my God, Olivia, you think you're going to get away with this? She swallowed hard, her heart pounding as she clicked on the trending video. 6.2 million views. A chill ran down her spine. She pressed play. The image of herself appeared, her face tense, her eyes frustrated. Then the scene of Benjamin pulling out his FBI badge, the murmurs of the passengers, the stifled laughs. Everything was captured. Below, thousands of comments flooded in. Did you see the FBI agent pull out the badge and her face freeze? Too funny. Another one who thought they could get away with it, but this time, exposed right on the spot. Someone find out who she is. I need to know her name. Olivia felt the world crash down around her. She had thought this story would end on the plane, but now it was just beginning. The numbers kept rising before her eyes. 10,000 views, 25,000, 97,000. Olivia Williams was trending. Her breath caught. Olivia shakily tapped on the comments, hoping someone would stand up for her. But no. We found out who she is. Someone like this shouldn't be employed anywhere. How did she think she'd get away with this? Can someone find her LinkedIn? I want to know where she works. Her heart raced, her fingers swiping across the screen as if she could stop the storm that was coming. Announcement from a major media company. We do not condone this behavior and will consider appropriate action. Another post. Olivia Williams, a racist on a plane. Should we let her lose her job? Lose her job? Her chest tightened. This wasn't just a viral video anymore. It had become a sentence against her. Anyone could become a target of the internet. And now, she was the target. Olivia nearly rushed off the plane the moment the door opened. She pulled her handbag close to her body, walking faster, trying to blend into the crowd. If she could just get out of the airport before anyone noticed. But then, she saw them. A group of reporters. Cameras ready, microphones raised. Eager eyes waiting. A young female reporter adjusted her headset, her eyes lighting up when she recognized Olivia. "It's her!" Olivia froze. Her breath caught in her throat. It was too late. They surged toward her like a wave, voices overlapping. "Mrs. Williams, do you have anything to say about the incident on the plane? Do you think your actions were discriminatory? You said you didn't feel safe. Would you like to explain?" Olivia couldn't move. Everything she had, control, reputation, power, was being stripped away right in front of her. She heard the clicks of cameras, the flash of lights, and Olivia Williams was still trending. She felt the entire world closing in on her. Her phone buzzed. She stepped into a corner of the airport, away from the reporters, her breath shallow. A flicker of hope crossed her mind. Maybe someone would help her. But when she looked at the screen, the name of the caller made her stomach drop. Mobile Andrew Moore, chairman of Marston Fund. She swallowed hard, her finger trembling as she slid to answer the call. "Andrew!" Her voice was barely a whisper, trying to find a reasonable explanation, but the voice on the other end carried no sympathy. "Olivia." Andrew paused for a moment, as though considering every word, but then he didn't mince words. "You need to resign." Olivia's entire body went numb. "This is affecting the fund's image," Andrew continued, his tone devoid of mercy. "We can't have your name associated with the organization anymore." The organization she had served for years, the place she had once been proud to be a part of. She gripped the phone tighter. "Andrew, let me explain. It's not what they're saying. The video says it all." Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Deep down, she knew he was right. The call ended. She stared at the screen, feeling as though her world had collapsed another layer. Everything Olivia had, gone in just a few hours. She sat in silence on a bench at the airport, her phone still in hand, but there was no hope of finding anything other than destruction. Email from the board of directors. "We regret to inform you that after an emergency meeting, we have decided to terminate your contract immediately." Notification from the company. "We can no longer continue our partnership with Mrs. Williams under the current circumstances." Latest news. Major corporation cuts ties with Olivia Williams after flight scandal. She had been influential, a powerful figure, a woman who everyone had to take seriously. Now, she was left with nothing but rubble. She scrolled through Twitter, her heart racing as she saw the posts. Olivia Williams lost everything because of one moment that exposed her true self. Imagine having a stellar career, then destroying it in less than 10 minutes. And she thought she wouldn't get caught? Olivia gripped the phone, her chest tightening. No one cared about her truth. She had once thought she was untouchable, but it turned out it had all been a fragile illusion. As Olivia's world was collapsing, Benjamin simply continued walking. He left the airport, unhurried, unfazed. The soft afternoon sun bathed his face as he pulled out his phone, reading a few messages from colleagues, none of them mentioning the incident on the plane, because for him, it was just another ordinary Tuesday. He called a taxi, got in, and opened his laptop. Work continued. A 4 p.m. meeting, a report that needed finishing, a colleague texting about next week's meeting. Nothing had changed. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Olivia was struggling to salvage her reputation, her phone constantly buzzing with bad news. Everything she had, her career, her status, her power, was slipping away like sand through her fingers. And Benjamin? He closed his laptop as the taxi stopped in front of the office. A new day awaited, another task to complete. The incident on the plane didn't concern him, because in the end, it had never been his problem. Olivia sat in her apartment, the light from her phone screen casting shadows on her face. What she was reading wasn't news about someone else. It was about herself. Each comment felt like a knife slicing into her pride. This is a lesson for those who think they can use their privilege to belittle others. She's lost everything, but that's probably not enough. A moment that exposed an entire character. She threw her phone onto the bed, but it kept buzzing, reminding her that the world hadn't forgotten. She had once thought that with enough power, she could control everything. But she was wrong. A few blocks away, Benjamin was enjoying a peaceful evening, sipping coffee as he looked out over the city. He didn't need to do anything. The truth had defended itself. Olivia realized that there was no escape for her. No one left to blame, no one left to manipulate. There was only one thing left to do: face her true self. And sometimes that's the harshest punishment of all. The story of Olivia Williams wasn't just a personal embarrassment, it was a warning. In today's world where every action can be recorded and spread in an instant, the truth cannot be hidden. The privileges that once helped some people avoid the consequences no longer protected them. Olivia made the great mistake of thinking she could manipulate the situation, that the injustice she caused would be forgotten. But she underestimated the power of justice, of truth, and most importantly, of those willing to stand up against injustice. Benjamin didn't need to speak, didn't need to argue, because Olivia's own actions had exposed her. This story is a lesson about responsibility. We cannot use our biases to degrade others without facing the consequences. In the end, the scariest thing isn't the world's judgment, but having to face ourselves. And the most important question is, will you choose to be the one causing injustice or the one standing up to protect the truth?